For almost any tree on Earth, a lightning strike is a death sentence. When a bolt hits, it carries up to 1 billion volts and temperatures that can reach tens of thousands of degrees, hotter than the surface of the sun. The electricity races down through the living wood, and the water inside the tree, the sap in its veins, the moisture in its cells, flashes instantly to steam. The tree does not burn so much as explode from the inside. Bark blows off in sheets. Trunks split open. Across the tropics, lightning is one of the leading killers of the largest, oldest trees in the forest, the giants that took centuries to grow. So imagine you are walking through the rainforest of Panama and you come upon a tree that has just been struck. The bolt was powerful. You can see the evidence everywhere around it. More than a dozen neighbouring trees are dying. A thick parasitic vine that had been strangling the crown has been blasted away. The ground is scorched. But the tree at the centre of it all, the one the lightning actually hit, is standing there almost untouched. Not damaged, not dying, barely scratched. This is not a freak survival. It is not luck. The forest ecologist who first noticed this, Evan Gora, went back and tracked strike after strike, and the pattern held. This particular kind of tree, a species called Dipteryx oleifera, the almenro, gets hit by lightning and walks away, while everything around it pays the price. And the more he studied it, the stranger the story became, because it started to look less like the tree was merely surviving the lightning, and more like the tree was using it. What if the single most destructive force in the forest, the thing that kills nearly everything it touches, had been turned, by one species of tree, into a weapon? What if a direct lightning strike was not a catastrophe for this tree at all, but the best thing that could possibly happen to it? Tonight we follow a single tree from the instant of the strike outward, into a discovery that quietly upends one of our oldest assumptions about disaster. Because the line between catastrophe and strategy may be far thinner than it looks, and some of the deepest intelligence in nature is hidden inside the events we are most certain are senseless. Welcome to Omni, where science meets story, and curiosity leads the way. Every week we dive into the hidden patterns of life, the universe, and everything in between. If curiosity drives you too, leave a thought in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to keep exploring with us. To understand how a tree could benefit from being struck by lightning, you first have to understand why lightning kills almost everything else. Lightning is one of the most violent events in the natural world. A single bolt can carry a current of tens of thousands of amperes and a voltage measured in hundreds of millions of volts, and it delivers all of that energy in a fraction of a second. When that current passes through a tree, it follows the path of least resistance, which in a living tree means the moist tissues just under the bark, the layers that carry water and sap. The energy heats that water so fast that it vaporizes explosively. The expanding steam can blow the bark clean off and crack the trunk apart. On top of that, the sheer electrical current can cook the living cells it passes through. For most trees, a direct strike means death, either immediately or over the following months as the damaged tissue fails and the tree slowly succumbs. In tropical forests, this is not a rare event. The tropics are among the most lightning-prone places on the planet, and the tallest trees, the emergent giants that rise above the canopy, are the most likely to be hit precisely because they stand highest. Research by Evan Gora and his colleagues has estimated that lightning is a major and underappreciated cause of death for large tropical trees, killing a substantial fraction of the biggest individuals and shaping the structure of the forest in ways scientists had long overlooked. For a tree, growing tall is a gamble. The higher you reach for the light, the more likely the sky is to kill you. Which is what makes Dipteryx oleifera such a profound anomaly. It helps to picture the tree itself. Dipteryx oleifera, known in Panama as the almenro, is a giant. It is one of the emergent species of the rainforest, the kind that pushes its crown clear above the general canopy and stands exposed against the sky. Mature almendros can live for centuries, their massive trunks rising straight before branching into a broad, spreading crown. Their hard, oily seeds, the source of the common name, which means almond, are an important food for wildlife, eaten by large rodents and prized by endangered great green macaws that depend on the species. This is not a fragile or marginal plant. It is one of the architectural pillars of its forest, a long-lived dominant that shapes the community of life around it. And its entire life strategy, it turns out, may be bound up with the very thing that should have killed it long ago. The almenro is also, crucially, exactly the kind of tree most exposed to strikes. Because it stands taller than its neighbours and holds a wide crown at the top of the canopy, it presents the most attractive target for a descending bolt. For nearly any other species, that exposure would be a fatal liability, a reason to stay low and sheltered. For the almenro, as we will see, it appears to be the opposite, which is what makes Dipteryx oleifera such a profound anomaly. The story really begins in 2015 in the forests of Barro Colorado Island in Panama, a long-studied patch of tropical rainforest managed by the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. Evan Gora, a forest ecologist now at the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies, was studying how lightning affects tropical forests, work that required him to develop systems for detecting and locating individual strikes. And in the course of that work, he and his colleagues came across a Dipteryx oleifera tree that had taken a direct, powerful hit. The strike had been strong enough to kill more than a dozen surrounding trees and to blast a parasitic vine out of the tree's crown, and yet the almenro itself was almost entirely unharmed. A single observation like that could be a fluke. So Gora's team did what good scientists do. They turned an anecdote into data. Using a custom lightning tracking system, an array of sensors that could pinpoint where bolts struck within the forest, they identified and located dozens of lightning strikes over several years. In the study they eventually published in the journal New Phytologist in March of 2025, they reported tracking 94 lightning strikes to 93 different trees in a mature Panamanian forest. Then following those struck trees for 2 to 6 years afterward, using both ground-based and drone-based observations, they measured survival, crown and trunk condition, the load of parasitic vines and the fate of the neighbouring trees. Locating a lightning strike inside a dense rainforest is harder than it sounds, and it is part of why this benefit went unnoticed for so long. A bolt lasts a fraction of a second, and the tree it hits may show no obvious sign for weeks or months, only slowly declining or, in the almendro's case, simply standing there fine. Gora's team built a specialised antenna array that could triangulate the location of individual strikes within the forest from the radio emissions lightning produces, then sent researchers and drones to the exact coordinates to find the struck tree and document the aftermath over the following years. It was this patient, strike-by-strike fieldwork, turning fleeting flashes into a long-term dataset, that allowed a single curious observation from 2015 to become a rigorous, quantified finding a decade later. The contrast was stark. When other species were struck, they tended to suffer and frequently die. But every one of the Dipteryx oleifera trees that took a direct hit in the study survived, with only minor damage. These trees seemed to shrug off a force that was devastating to their neighbours. And here is where the story turns from survival into strategy, because the lightning was not just sparing the almendro, it was actively clearing out its competition. Consider what a large tree is up against in a rainforest. Light is the currency of survival, and the canopy is a brutal, slow-motion war for access to the sun. A tree's nearest neighbours are its direct rivals, crowding its space, competing for light and water and nutrients. When lightning strikes a Dipteryx oleifera and jumps to the trees around it, or travels through the air and through connecting branches and vines, it kills those rivals. Gora's team found that a single strike killed on average around 9 neighbouring trees, with some strikes killing more than 50. In one event, a strike that left the almendro nearly untouched killed 57 of its neighbours over the following 2 years. The tree at the centre stood in a suddenly opened clearing, with more light, more space, and far less competition than before. Then there are the lianas, the parasitic woody vines that are one of the great burdens of a tropical tree's life. Lianas climb up trees to reach the canopy without building their own trunks, and in doing so, they smother the host's crown, steal its light, add weight, and compete for resources, measurably reducing a tree's growth and reproduction. A heavy liana load is like being slowly strangled, and lightning, it turns out, is extraordinarily good at burning these vines away. Because lianas often form electrical bridges between trees and drape across the crown, the current runs through them and destroys them. Gora's team found that being struck cut a Dipteryx oleifera's liana load by roughly 78%. In a single instant, the lightning stripped away most of the parasites that had been choking the tree. So step back and add it up. The lightning hits the almenro and barely harms it. It kills around 9 of the tree's direct competitors. It burns away nearly 4/5 of the parasitic vines, draining its resources. The tree emerges into a clearing, flooded with new light, freed of its strangling vines, surrounded by dead rivals. From the tree's perspective, the most destructive event in the forest has just done it an enormous favour. The researchers quantified what that favour is worth over a lifetime, and the number is staggering. Factoring in the improved survival, reduced competition, and freedom from lianas, they calculated that the ability to tolerate lightning strikes raises a Dipteryx oleifera's lifetime reproductive output, its total expected production of seeds and offspring, by roughly 14-fold. 14 times more reproductive success, granted by the very thing that kills almost every other tree in the forest. By the team's estimate, a mature almendro can expect to be struck multiple times across its long life, and each strike, rather than being a brush with death, is closer to a windfall. Seen from above, the almendro effectively turns the airspace around it into a danger zone. A tall, lightning-attracting tree that survives its strikes and passes the energy outward becomes a kind of hazard to everything growing near it, like living next to a lightning rod that fires regularly and electrocutes the neighbourhood. Over time, this could reshape the whole community of trees around an established almendro, thinning out competitors again and again, keeping the giant's surroundings open and favourable. The tree is not just surviving the storms, it may be using them, across decades, to engineer the forest in its own favour, maintaining its dominance strike after strike. What looks like a single dramatic event is really one move in a slow game played out over a lifetime measured in centuries. This raises the obvious question: how? How does one tree survive what destroys all the others? This is where the science is still actively being worked out, and the researchers are careful to frame it as a leading hypothesis rather than a settled fact. The most likely explanation lies in the tree's physical and electrical properties. The idea is that Dipteryx oleifera is built in effect like a better conductor. If the tree's wood and internal architecture allow electrical current to flow through it, with low resistance, then the energy passes through quickly without dumping enough heat into any one place to boil the sap and blow the tree apart. A poor conductor resists the current, and resistance is exactly what generates destructive heat. A good conductor lets the lightning pass through almost like a wire, grounding the strike with minimal damage. Some measurements suggest that Dipteryx wood may have lower electrical resistance than that of other species, and the tree's large size and tall exposed crown, far from being a liability, may make it an even more effective lightning rod, attracting strikes that it is uniquely equipped to survive and redirect into its neighbours. It is important to be honest that the exact mechanism is not yet fully nailed down, and the researchers themselves treat it as the most promising explanation, rather than proven fact. Measuring the electrical properties of living wood inside a towering rainforest tree mid-strike is extraordinarily difficult, and there may be more to the story than conductivity alone. Perhaps something in the tree's internal structure, its water content, or the way its tissues recover from damage. This is the honest texture of science at the frontier. The pattern is clear and well documented, the almendro survives and benefits, but the precise machinery behind it is still being uncovered, and that open question is part of what makes the discovery so compelling rather than less. A solved mystery closes a door. This one has opened several. There is a beautiful and slightly unsettling logic here. Most trees evolved to avoid being struck, growing in the shelter of others, and simply died when they were unlucky. Dipteryx oleifera appears to have evolved in the opposite direction, becoming taller, more exposed, more likely to be hit, precisely because being hit is no longer a danger but an advantage. It has turned the tallest position in the forest, the most dangerous real estate under a thunderstorm, into the safest place to be. The tree does not avoid the lightning, it invites it, absorbs it, and channels it outward into everything that stands in its way. And this is the deeper idea the whole story has been circling. We tend to sort the events of the world into neat categories. Some things are good, and some things are disasters. Lightning, fire, flood, storm. These belong in the column marked catastrophe, senseless destruction, bad luck, but the almenro reveals how shallow that sorting can be. The same bolt of lightning is a catastrophe for one tree and a windfall for another. The destruction is real, but whether it is disaster or a strategy depends entirely on what you are built to do with it. Across millions of years, evolution found a way to take the single, most violent force in the forest and convert it into a tool for clearing competitors, shedding parasites, and dominating the canopy. There is also a hint that the almenro may not be entirely alone. The full title of Gora's study refers to Dipteryx oleifera and other large-statured trees, and the researchers suggest that the capacity to tolerate or even benefit from lightning may extend to other big, dominant species across tropical forests. If that proves true, it would mean lightning is not just an occasional accident shaping the forest, but a quiet, persistent selective force, one that has been favouring certain giant trees over their neighbours for as long as thunderstorms have rolled across the tropics. The forest we see, with its particular winners towering over the canopy, may be partly sculpted by the lightning we assumed was only destroying it. The implication is that an entire dimension of how tropical forests are built, which species rise to dominance and why, may have been hiding in plain sight in the storms overhead. It's also a striking example of how a single, almost accidental observation can overturn a settled assumption. For generations, ecologists treated lightning as pure loss, a source of mortality to be tallied on the negative side of the ledger. Nobody thought to ask whether any tree might be coming out ahead, because the premise that lightning is bad seemed too obvious to question. It took someone noticing one suspiciously healthy tree in a field of dead ones, and then refusing to dismiss it, to reveal that the ledger had a hidden column all along. Some of the most important discoveries in biology are not new facts so much as old assumptions finally turned over to see what was underneath. It is worth remembering that this is not unique to one tree. Across the living world, organisms repeatedly turn apparent catastrophes into engines of renewal. Many pine forests depend on wildfire, with cones that only open and release their seeds in the heat of a blaze, so that the fire that destroys the old forest plants the next one. Certain grasslands and savannas exist only because fire regularly sweeps through and prevents trees from taking over. The lodgepole pine, the giant sequoia, entire ecosystems are not merely tolerant of fire, but built around it, structured by the very force we instinctively call destruction. What looks like ruin from one vantage point is, from another, the precise mechanism of life's continuation. There are consequences here that reach well beyond a single tree too. Because the almenro is a keystone of its forest, its lightning-fueled success ripples outward through everything that depends on it. The great green macaw, an endangered parrot, relies heavily on Dipteryx for food and nesting, so the tree's persistence is quietly bound up with the bird's survival. Large tropical trees like the almenro also store enormous quantities of carbon and anchor the structure of the forest canopy. Understanding that lightning helps determine which giants live and which die means understanding a hidden lever on tropical forest composition, carbon storage, and biodiversity all at once. A finding that began with one oddly healthy tree turns out to touch the fate of endangered birds and the carbon balance of the rainforest itself. The lightning that looked like nothing but destruction is, on closer inspection, one of the quiet forces shaping an entire living system. The lightning-struck almenro simply makes this truth impossible to ignore. Standing there in its scorched clearing, untouched amid the dying, it is a living argument that catastrophe and strategy are not opposites but often the same event, seen across different spans of time and from different points of view. The bolt that would have ended almost any other tree is for this one the foundation of its success, repeated across a lifetime that can stretch for centuries. And that should change, just slightly, the way you look at disaster itself. The next time you see lightning split the sky, remember that somewhere in a Panamanian forest there is a tree waiting for exactly that. A tree for which the most senseless violence in nature is not an ending but an opportunity. It is a reminder that the universe is rarely as simple as good fortune and bad, and that some of the most remarkable intelligence in life is hidden inside the events we are most certain we already understand. What we call a catastrophe is sometimes only a strategy we have not yet learned to recognize, waiting in plain sight for someone willing to look again.